Okay.
Okay.
Hey, Jan,
Hey.
what did you change your name to? Oh, women's equality. I would have did something special. I didn't have time to think of anything to be special about though. So I went with the old standby, earned so nice. Do you remember where the so nice came from in Detroit? Remember those? I want
Yes,
to,
everybody was so nice.
yeah, well, everybody was, oh, I know what it was. Everybody was something nice. Like,
Yes.
Jan
Yeah.
nice, Tim nice.
Yes.
So I
And
just
then
added the so in front of mine to make it better. So I became Earn So Nice.
everybody's so nice.
So that's where my name came from today. What about your name?
Okay, so mine actually comes from the fact that on August the 26th, we celebrated Women's Equality Day in this country, or acknowledged it in this country. Many on the federal level, the White House here in Michigan, they acknowledged the fact that this commemorates the signing of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. However, I would be remiss and not stating that even though women were given the right to vote, that did not include Black women, although we were part of the the charge and the work to ensure this ratification. And so I did just kind of want to point out that Black women, along with men, didn't receive the actual right to vote until 1965, although women in America received the right to vote in 1920.
You mean
And with that, huh?
you mean white women received the right to vote?
White women, yes, white women received the right to vote in 1920. But we did have a lot of great women that were part of that charge. And so I do just want to acknowledge, their work. And that would be Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell, Sojourner Truth, Frances Ellen Watkins Hopper, and Nanny Burroughs, just to name a few. There were others as well. Both of the national sororities at the time were part of the suffragette movement. So, just want to acknowledge their work in not only women's rights, but civil rights as well.
Okay. Now I feel bad because mine was so self-serving.
That's
Talking
okay.
about her is so nice. But that does kind of lead us into our conversation today because we're the blacks from Washburn, but
Yes, yes.
so we want to talk about Washburn and what that meant, growing up. What that means,
Right.
like, do you ever go by there? Do you drive by the street? Do you ever see it?
I do drive by the street. I haven't actually gone through there. I've looked at the house online and found it a couple of times just to see, like, what it looks like now. I mean, it definitely is a lot different from when we were, kids growing up there. But I've driven by, I've taken my daughter by to
Okay.
say, like, hey, this is where I grew up. Yeah.
I took my children by there probably a couple of times in life. I don't know if we, went down the block though. We may have just been in the vicinity.
Yeah.
Just to say, oh, this is the house I grew up in. This is the block. This is what where we hung out, what we
Right,
did,
right.
blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. But yeah, I mean, it's reminiscing on your childhood and the good parts, the bad parts. Um, yeah, because I don't think anybody's childhood is 100% good. I mean, the stuff that might be bad for some kids is, just kid bad. Like,
Yes, relative. Hmm.
I fell off my bike and broke my leg or whatever it was that happened for them. Um, so what do you think about when you think about Washburn? What comes to mind for you?
I mean, I mean, for me, it honestly, I think a lot about growing up, having, like we talked previously about having friends that kind of like you have friends in the actual neighborhood that were also your friends in school and that kind of thing. I just remember that sense of community that we had on the block because, if you did something, you might have a neighbor that would say, girl, your mama said X, Y, and Z if they didn't whoop you themselves. So,
Did that,
I
okay, because I hear people say that all the time, like the neighbors will give you a whipping. I don't remember that. Do you? Did that happen?
well, I don't think it happened to us per se, but it did happen. We just got the like, you better, your mama don't play that. I'ma tell your mama.
Yeah, I remember. I remember a lot of. I'm gonna tell your mama
I'm sure
a
you
lot.
did.
But yeah. I remember what I remember most about Washburn. This is going to be obscure. Is the big B on the garage? Just that
Ah,
red door on the garage and
with the big, yeah.
with the big B. Um, I did I paint the garage door? I don't remember how that big B got on the garage, but I remember it was there.
No, I painted the B on the garage. I
Yeah, but
didn't paint
I
the,
painted the door,
yeah,
like
the red.
the red. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and that's what I, I remember most. And we always had bees and hornets, wasps, whatever. Like every year. Oh, and
Yeah, because we had a lot of fruit trees.
is that where they came from?
We had a lot of fruit trees and in that field next door, those wildflowers, that bees pollinate, those kinds of flowers or whatever. So yes, so yeah, we did have a lot of bees. They were like, oh my
Yes,
God.
every
Trying to
time
run away.
cutting hedges, you just
Yeah, yeah,
stung
yeah.
by bees. And
Hmm.
I used to be like, why can't they just cut down these hedges and just and clean up the space a little, and maybe we wouldn't have so many bees. But I do remember, I remember that, and I remember what I liked. I think the most about the house was the fruit trees.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so because we had a lot of fruit in those trees. I don't know what
Hmm.
happened to the trees. I think they started dying by the time we were young adults, like 20
Yeah,
or
probably. Yeah, because I think they had started cutting down. I think at one point it was only the pear tree left, and now it's like not. I've driven by. There's no trees. That big bush hedge is gone,
thank goodness, because that,
and
first of all, you couldn't see around it when you were pulling out
yeah,
the driveway.
yeah, that
Um,
was
Secondly,
kind of
that's where
rough.
all the bees were.
Yes, they would be in that bush. Or I remember once there was a wasp nest in there when we were little, and I remember our father setting it on fire, and those things were just flying out. I'm like, that was, the crazy days. Nobody would dare do anything like that. No, you
Yeah,
gotta.
who's gonna set a bush on fire? And you can't. We're not firemen. We are fire people. We can't control it. You know what I'm saying? I don't have that kind of training. That's crazy.
But that got rid of the wasps too with
Yeah, but
scenario
I
wasps.
do remember growing up, you would always smell smoke. Like who in the backyard burning their personal papers? Oh, it's like they didn't have any regard for this could get out of hand.
No, not none
It was
whatsoever.
just anyway. Do you have
It's like, I just thought about poosh, that's fine, that's fine.
do you have any favorite memories of Washburn? I mean, 'cause when we grew up, I mean, life was a little bit different. I always say we grew up in the say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud 70s. So there was a lot of encouragement, enrichment, all those things going on. I think about summer a lot. So what do you think about when you think about Washburn?
I, I, for me, one of the things, even though they didn't live there, the fact that our older cousins were always there,
Mhm.
whether they were babysitting or they were there to see our parents or whatever, but the fact that they were always around. And so that helped to shape our, you know, like, besides our parents, of course, but having them around shaped our fashion, shaped our music, love of music, and just different things because they were at the time, it seemed like they were so much older than us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
They are
that,
old
well,
though.
not as old as you think. Like when you
I mean,
consider
what
it's
are they
only
now?
like a
Like
5 year
70?
difference. It's a 5 and 6 year difference. Like, I mean, at the time when you're 5 and they're 10, or when you're 10 and they're 15, and when you're 15 and they're 20, yes. But now,
Yeah. 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 Um, I don't know. I like growing up on Washburn, but I I I was okay if we ever left. If we ever moved somewhere else, I would have been fine.
yeah, I agree with that. I remember that at one point we had been, house shopping and we never moved, but I think we were excited about the potential to move. One, because I think as we got older, we realized how small that house really was.
Yeah.
And then the one bathroom thing, I'm like, oh my, like I don't know how we, made it through.
Um, Timing, I suppose. I don't think anybody spent a lot of time in the bathroom.
No, you could not.
So you were in and out. But I do remember that move. I remember that potential move because
Hmm.
I was going into, I guess, middle school. So I was leaving the primary school and going into
Hmm.
middle school. And because we were supposed to move, I didn't do the paperwork, or Ma didn't
Oh yes, for to go to Region Five.
go to Region 5, which was the
Yeah,
the magnet.
magnet. Yeah.
And so we didn't
You
move.
know, I forgot about that because I always wondered, like, okay, how come he didn't go to Region Five? That
Because
was
we're
why.
supposed to move, even though I'm sure if she looked back on it, she would say, well, it's still probably in the same region. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So he could have
yeah.
gone to the school anyway.
Hmm.
But I ended up not going to that school, which meant I had to scramble and find a school. And if you remember, I went to Fitzgerald like for a couple of days, like very few days.
Oh, you did? See, I didn't think you
Uh-huh.
ever set foot in Fitzgerald.
I did. I went, how school used to start like on a Wednesday? So I think I went Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and that Monday I was somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, so, you know, I went to end up going to Schultz actually.
Yeah.
I went to school. And I guess because Fitzgerald was kind of a bit rougher than
It wasn't a bit rougher, it was rough. Like nobody wanted their kids in our area really to go to Fitzgerald. So everybody was excited about these new region schools or magnet schools because I mean it was Region 5 wasn't the only one. I think there was a Region 4 one, and like they were all excited about the potential of their children not having to go to Fitzgerald. Now I'm sure the people that went to Fitzgerald felt like it ain't that bad, but our where we were, they were
it was
like,
quite a ways away too. I mean, it wasn't like close.
no, it
I mean,
wasn't.
you could walk to it, but it was a nice little walk.
It was a walk, yeah, but back then we did walk, so
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the school I ended up going to was obviously much further.
right.
But it, and I think that was the beginning of the end for me in Washburn,
Hmm.
was because, like you said, I was no longer going to school with anybody from our block.
Right.
So everybody was new, even though there were people, from the primary school who were at,
Hmm.
so I knew them. But for the most part, it was nobody who lived in our neighborhood who was related.
Right.
Um, and so, that meant that I was no longer going to the neighborhood schools, and I never went to the neighborhood school ever again. Um, and I was fine with that. So that was the beginning of the end for me and kind of hanging out on Washburn or,
Mhm.
anything. Like all through middle school and high school, I don't think I did anything with anybody on the block.
I didn't as much either. I mean, even though, once I got to middle school, I was no longer going to the neighborhood school either. So, but there were people from the neighborhood that were at, that school. And then of course in high school, there were people that, went to the high school. But yeah, your circle of friends begin to change because you're not going to school necessarily with all the people that you grew up with anymore, which now that's no big thing, but back then that
Yeah.
was like a big thing to lose all your neighborhood friends, because that's kind of like your school support as well.
Yeah. And also, I mean, that's who you kind of hung out with in the summer.
Yeah,
And because I didn't go to school with them, I didn't hang out with them in the summer.
right.
Like I would get on my bike, which, could be dangerous. I'm riding 3 miles.
Yeah, or we honestly, it's probably more because actually you were talking, I was thinking about how I used to go bike riding with my new friends from middle school. And like, again, it was Region 5, but we were all over Region 5. And they used to come because a lot of them were like Dexter and Davison, and they would
Okay.
ride all the way over, pick me up, and then we would ride even further, with no adult.
With no adult. And
No adult.
adults have no way of finding out where you are.
No, because they no cell phone, no tracker, no nothing. These kids just out in these streets, but we know to be home before it get dark.
So I do want to talk about remember the kid when we were in primary school who was riding his bike with his friend and how
Yes,
do
I
I
know what you're about to say.
okay, can you say it? Because you probably will say it with much more compassion. I was gonna say who got murdered.
Well, I wasn't even going to go there, even though that's what eventually happened. But I was going to say that he got kidnapped,
I don't
because
did he get kidnapped? Because I know he
they
was
were
missing,
kidnapped. So
but I
they were,
didn't know if kidnap was the thing.
yes,
I was
I
a bit
think,
younger, even though he was my age. We were in the same grade.
yes. So his sister, was in my um, class.
Mhm.
So we all knew her, but I remember by then we were in middle school, and because they had moved out of the neighborhood and
Okay.
they were living somewhere else. Um, but because I don't know if you remember, because they were like a performing family. Like she had been a model, he had been
Oh,
doing
I didn't know
commercials on
there had done
TV,
anything.
and like
I remember
they
he had
were,
done commercials.
yeah.
Like
And she was a child model, and so like but yes, I remember he was. I don't think that he was killed initially. Like, yes, he was, I just remember those helicopters. Like we hadn't
every
seen
night.
that. Like every night you would see those helicopters, like, combing all the areas with those searchlights on. I don't know that I really had a sense of like doom and despair really until like that happened. It was like very, I remember it being like in our classroom. Um, my social studies teacher at the time, was, talking to the class about that, because, you're talking about safety and all that kind of stuff. And then she realized that several of us in the class knew exactly who he was, because, his sister had been in our class at
Mhm.
least, if not 3 years, 4 years.
Mhm.
Um, we probably, like, now they would do a trauma counselor, but
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
at the time, I do just kind of remember that. And I remember that when they finally found the two of them,
Mhm.
that, their bodies were not together, like their bodies were like
Uh,
separate, from one another. So that was very sad. But yeah, but that didn't happen a lot. Like now, that nobody would ever dare let their kids, ride the bike like that without having some kind
I
of,
mean, they
information or
do,
whatever.
and maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know, but certainly not just out riding
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
miles.
I
And
mean, but there was no way I mean, at during that time, we had no reason to believe that it wasn't safe, especially if you were riding with a friend. Like it wasn't like,
right,
I mean, even though they were kids, like, I mean, I think about like just I always tell people we walked all over Detroit. Like I
yeah,
remember, because of course, I mean, sometimes the bus would be really slow or wasn't coming. And so you like, I'm not gonna stay here for hours. I could be at
I
the,
could be home by the time this bus comes.
by the time the bus come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to get back to this, but I also want to say, since we're on the topic, I have only seen the Puritan bus once in my life. It was coming. I was on the Greenfield bus. It was about to pass Puritan. I looked, I saw the Puritan bus. I was like, I gotta get on it because I had seen the bus stop for years, but I had never seen the
Yes.
bus.
So at, I remember even back then though, you may not recall, but the Puritan bus had um its reputation was that it was the slowest bus of the city.
I
you
believe it
know,
because I've only seen
I
it.
remember. I don't know if you remember when we went to the. Remember Parks and Rec used to do those different things, and I had the ballet class, and it was
Oh
down
yeah,
at
yeah.
U of D and stuff like that. I remember that after ballet class, because of course it's like right Puritans right there, we would walk from what 6 Mile UFD
Mhm.
Puritan all the way down back home, and still, like you
Never
said,
see the bus.
no bus in sight, no
Yeah,
bus in
yeah.
sight.
So, and I just want to get back to the young man who was kidnapped when we were kids. Because, at that age, I wanted to do what he was doing.
Yeah.
I remember being slightly jealous of him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember feeling really, really bad
Hmm.
when his body was found. Like,
Yeah.
really bad. Like, how could I be jealous of this kid? And I think I learned a lot about myself in that time period. Mind you, I was what, 7, maybe
Yeah,
6,
probably.
maybe.
Hmm.
You know, just do your own thing. Just,
Yeah.
it doesn't pay to be jealous of anybody. And I think that was the last time. I'm going to say this with some certainty. I think that was the last time I was ever jealous of anyone.
Jealous. Hmm.
Was in that situation. So even as life has progressed and people do things, I'm happy for them doing it. I'm happy when I get stuff, but I'm never jealous of anybody else
Right.
for
Right.
what they got, for what they did. So that's one thing I remember the most about Washburn, was really kind of shaping that. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's also my kind of sad memory as well. I mean, there
Mm-hmm.
were other things. Just with friends or not friends. I look back on
Mm-hmm.
some of that. Like when I got to high school, I met someone who knew the people who were on our block.
Okay.
And that person was telling them stories like, hey, this happened and this happened. And one story was, and in those days we played cowboys and Indians.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the Indian, maybe. And I got tied to the tree in front of our house, that big old tree that should have
Mm-hmm.
been cut down years ago because it was absolutely tearing up that sidewalk.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Uh, and then they left and never came back. And who untied me from the tree was mine.
Oh, I don't know this story.
Yeah, I don't think I don't know where you were. Grown doing middle school stuff or whatever.
Probably.
But yeah, in that I was like, okay, these people aren't my friends, so I'm gonna stop calling them such.
Uh,
And I never did again. I was, you know, of course, by that time I'm going off to, my own,
Hmm.
middle school, whatever, the later years of elementary. And so, I think that kind of pushed me towards kind of outgrowing Washburn as well, because I wanted to hang out with people who wanted me to hang out with them.
Right. Yep. I would
So,
agree
I
with
was
that.
cool with it. It was no hard feelings,
Hmm.
but I was like, yeah, I'm out. So I'm
Yeah.
good here. So I think that
Yeah.
was probably one of the, a bad memory, I guess, if I want to call it that. But, I view everything as a blessing, even though I
Hmm.
rarely use that word. Like I don't tell people to have a blessed day. Have a blessed day. I rarely use that word, but I
And I
think,
use it all the time.
you, I,
Yeah.
I think it's just, it just kind of shaped, me as a child to be the person that I wanted to be. Do you have any, maybe not that bad, maybe you weren't tied to a tree or anything, but do you have some memory about Washburn that wasn't so fantastic?
Oh, look, you know, I've come to terms at this point in my life that I was really bullied a lot. um, as a kid growing. So even though I have a lot of fond memories, I remember that people used to jump on me and beat
Yeah.
me up all the time. And it wasn't, I think for me, I really, I don't think, I don't think because our parents were young, they didn't really know how to talk to me about that because it wasn't that I was scared. I just, in my heart of hearts, I did not believe in fighting and violence. I always tell people I'm a lover, not a fighter. I'm just that's how I've been all the time. And our grandmother would always say of me that I was very tenderhearted.
Uh,
So, so I
think,
just was
I think.
very compassionate for people. And I think that, and just as you're saying, what I realized is that people were taking my
Kind for weakness,
compassion,
for weakness.
huh? Yes, for weakness until I eventually started fighting folks. And I didn't even really want to. I remember having this fight with this one girl on the block, and I was tearing her up. Like I was, tearing
Mhm.
her up. But I was crying the entire time. And interesting enough, our mother and one of our neighbors, adults, was sitting there watching me tear this
Oh
person
wow.
up and not intervening. And later on, when me and Ma would talk about it, she was like, "Why was you crying?" Because I didn't want to fight. I
Yeah.
I did not want to fight. But I also, I mean, from that experience, I think that's when I started to begin to toughen up, which I do feel like that's not who I am, but it's who I've had to be. So even now when people say stuff like she all standish or she this, that, and the other, that experience in being bullied all the time really, I don't want to say hardened me, but it made me look at people differently. So I don't just, I'm a compassionate person, but there's certain things that you don't get from me if you don't give it to me. If you, if you're going to act a certain way, I don't have any space for that, but you don't get to be in my space.
Hmm. I remember your fights more than my own
I
because I
know.
always had to help.
I know. And here's the thing that was, I think, for me as a growing up is that people didn't fight you, but they fought me. And one of the things, our mother kept, she kept saying was, as long as you don't fight, they're going to fight you. And as a kid, you don't really understand that. But I wish that we could have had a discussion a different way. I don't know that our parents really understood at the time how much thinker processors we were as kids.
Yeah.
To be able to like we understood more than I think they gave us credit for.
Mhm. We were certainly wise beyond kid years. I would
Absolutely.
say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so much so that I just said at the age of 6, I was like, okay, this is an epiphany.
Yeah.
This is what I need to do from here on. But I thought about your fights and um, our cousins' fights because I was the one who always had to intervene, and people ask, well, why do you act this way? Why are you so like no one has ever bothered? They say I'm mean, they say I'm this. No one's ever bothered to ask me why. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
has an opinion about it, but no one, I mean, if you just ask me, you might find out, well, because I've always had to fight.
Hmm.
I was the family fighter. So everyone else got to go. But I was in everyone's fight.
Yeah.
So, I think that, shapes who you are as well.
Right.
Always have to be the one who's, looking out for someone, the one who's a bit tougher.
Hmm.
So, Jansky, we're at the point where we're gonna do a couple of rapid fire questions. I know, right?
Okay. Here we go.
So this is a yes or no, but you can elaborate. Do you ever miss Washburn?
I mean, I would honestly, I would say no. I don't know that I miss it. I do have a lot of fond memories of it. I do appreciate the childhood that I had there. But like, would I want to go back? I mean, we had the opportunity to keep that house and we chose not to. So it's not like,
You want to keep this house? I don't remember that.
hmm,
Did someone say, did you want to keep this house? I don't,
yes, yeah.
oh, no, that must have been mine. Did she say,
Because before she sold it, she was gonna give it to us if we had, and neither one of us wanted it.
because that was probably in the 90s when she sold that house.
Yeah,
It's now 2023. My answer has not changed.
yeah. I mean, I look at it, and I mean, there are reasons that I would have kept it, which have nothing to do with my childhood, just because I think it would have helped family situations at a particular time. But like to no, I don't. I'm not one of those people where like, oh my God, that's my childhood home. I just no, that wasn't my thing.
It needed some walls knocked out, honestly. Probably if I owned it now, it would definitely be an open space floor plan and on the front.
Oh yeah, it would need to be just because it's so small.
So small, you just want to open
Hmm.
that boy up.
Yeah, you need to knock some walls out for sure.
So, is there anything that you would change about growing up there? Is there anything that you would change about growing up on Washburn?
I think, well, and I think for me, I've kind of worked through this already, but I remember um, the the issues and actions that caused our parents to get divorced were so public,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know, um, and because it was so public, I felt a lot of shame growing up, there like I was ashamed, and though I probably was already starting to go a different way because I was in middle school and had a different group of friends or whatever. I think that pushed me further away from not wanting to have to deal with or be around people that were on the block because I didn't want to have to answer questions about, what was happening in our household. I was very ashamed of that. Um, and then of course, I mean, as I get older, like we have no control over anybody's behavior or whatever. And I mean, it's just like, people were being kids, but some of that is like, I mean, unless you're here to help, like, nobody ever asked like how I was doing or like we know that this happened, but are you okay or whatever. that never happened. Everybody just wanted to know the story. So that's again, as you talk about like knowing who your friends are and stuff like that. Nobody, that circle didn't do that. Now in junior high school, even though they didn't know like the public stuff that was going on, they knew that stuff was going on with me because just behavior. I was crying all the time. I was upset, and people really kind of rallied around me in middle school.
Yeah, that was very public, especially for that time. But
Yeah.
my thought process is it was no different than any other family on that block. Ours was just outside because I didn't see it any different. Like when you went over people's houses,
Yeah.
same noises, the same argument,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I didn't take it personal. Um, so I never took that personal. I remember you took it a lot harder than I did.
Yeah.
Well, know, but that don't have nothing to do with me. But let's move forward. We got to get up out of here. Any parting words when we talk about Washburn? I remember sitting on the porch a lot when it rained. Um,
Okay, so yeah, so when you talk about things that bring you joy or whatever, like the fact that we would sit out in the rain in those rocking chairs. And honestly, I think we used to have some pretty deep discussions during that time. Like we would talk about everything, under the sun or whatever. And it would just rain. And I remember like it would start raining and our mother would say, "Come on in the house." And we were like, "Can we just sit out on the porch?" And sometimes that rain would start coming down really hard. And she would be like, "Okay, y'all, it's time to come in." But so I really do like that. I do still like the fact that we had that sense of community. I mean, despite some of the things that we talked about, because I always say it was like a Dickens novel. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Like, and neither one outrules them, outrules the other, but I think that they shape us. Like having that experience growing up on Washburn, I believe shaped the person that I am. And so I'm definitely grateful for that. I'm grateful for all our neighbors that, came through for us um, before the divorce and after the divorce, friends that, did little things, the neighbors that looked out for ma, as a single parent, like all of that. Like I can't say that I didn't experience community at all. And I appreciate, it all very much. Most of the frustrations I have are my own internal stuff that I've had, had to work through, but it was a good experience.
yeah, I enjoyed it for what it was worth. I enjoyed it for when it was and how it was for and why it was for the time period that it was.
Mm-hmm.
But being clear, I was definitely ready to move on. And I was probably more ready as a child than I probably should have been, which is why I was okay with moving when we were going.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, because it's time. I've done everything
Mm-hmm.
I do here. I think that carried over as an adult, which is probably why I lived in so many cities as an adult that, I was like, I'm done here. I've done everything I need to do here. I can move. Oh, of course, I've been in this city forever.
Yeah.
Not. Anyway, any parting words?
Oh, I thought I gave my parting
That was
words
parting
already.
words. Okay, want to say because I talked about Washburns so badly, I think I, I really want to glow it up a little bit because I really did appreciate growing up there. I loved playing baseball in our side yard. Remember, we had a
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
yard. I liked that side yard. I think I didn't like mowing it though. It took an hour
Oh,
to.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's because it's a big yard, especially when you're a little kid. But I mean, Washburn is great. I take nothing, you know, I don't even the stuff that happened with us. I don't look back on Washburn like, oh my God, my childhood was so tragic. I hated that. That's not, I mean, you know, we had the opportunity to be around a lot, there was a lot of smart kids in our neighborhood. Like, and so we learned so much from each other. I think about like the boys down the street that were always doing those awesome science projects. Like I just, and of course, then of course we had a lot of sports people and stuff, but there, like, we had a lot of creative and um kind of masterminds that we got the chance to know when we were still little. you know Everybody doesn't get that opportunity. So I am definitely grateful for everybody, all our neighbors. I mean, it couldn't have been better.
Okay. And with that, we will wrap it up. I thought I was sing my song that I made with our babysitter.
Oh, no, you got to do it. What
We
song?
movies, everything was groovy.
Oh, yes.
And at the time. So maybe another time I will bless America with that one hit wonder. All right. Everybody have a great day. Bye, Jan.
Bye.